am I here for?
Thank you so much for that great question. What are you here for? I don't mean sitting here in the sanctuary right now. I mean, what are you here for? Why did you, that little shard of the great universal consciousness, put in an appearance in this physical body, in this lifetime, 80 years ago, 60 years ago, 20 years ago, however long it was? Why did you show up here? Why did you come here? Do you know? Absolutely, be the love. That's a great answer. And it's worth asking yourself that question because that is the heart of every religion, every philosophy in the world. In the 1920s and 30s, a great philosopher, Aldous Huxley, great British philosopher, he wrote the book Brave New World, which you may have been compelled to read in high school. But better reading actually is his book Island. It's a book about, was a sequel to Brave New World, all about this island where these people live. And there are all these cues on the island to help remind them of who they were. Like there are these birds, these parrots on the island. And the birds have only one phrase they say, and that is, here and now. So wherever you're walking around the island, there's a bird squawking, here and now, here and now, here and now. So remember who you are, and what Aldous Huxley wrote about, he looked at the commonalities between all the religions, all the great philosophies in the world. Now this was a very new idea, a very new concept in the 1920s, 1930s, 1950s, because if you went back a century to the early 1800s, the Hindus and the Muslims and the Jews and the Buddhists were all very, very separate from each other. And Hinduism looked at Christianity and couldn't understand it. Christianity, monotheistic religion, looked at the polytheistic religions, was totally baffled by them. And the idea was that these religions are very, very different. And only in the middle of the 1800s did great people, some great sages begin to say, there's a central core to all of them. And Aldous Huxley then defined that, and he used a really interesting phrase for that. Anyone know what that phrase was that Aldous Huxley used for the commonality to all the world's religions? The perennial philosophy. The perennial philosophy. The perennial philosophy that's there underlying all of the great philosophical traditions. And in that perennial philosophy says there are three elements that are common to all of these great movements. Three things that are common to them. One is that we live in a world of change, and the world obviously changes moment by moment. Right now it's 10:26, and it's going to be 10:27 shortly, and then my cells are going to change, and my body will age a day, and then it'll be tomorrow, and then it'll be next week, next year. The world's changing. The seasons change. Nature changes. Science changes. There are all these things that are impermanent in our lives. Planets change. You know, in a few billion years, the sun will burn out. And so there are all these great cosmic cycles, even from the microcosm to the macrocosm, things change. But the first principle of the perennial philosophy is that underneath the world of change, there's something changeless. Underneath the world of change, there is something changeless. There's an eternal reality below that. And we now think of that as consciousness. That underlies all of that, because consciousness is this unchanging reality underlying the world of change. And in the great Indian traditions, they say the fundamental cause of suffering is the inability to distinguish what is real and permanent from what is unreal and impermanent. You have to figure that out, that there's something below the world of change. And the second element of the perennial philosophy is that a shard of that is in all of us. You, when you decided 50 years ago, 75 years ago, 90 years ago, 25 years ago, to sort of grab onto the cosmic zip line and zip your way down and land in a body, and suddenly this little baby was born, and there you were scrolling the world. There's an element of that in you. There's an element of that cosmic consciousness, that eternal in you. That's the second idea in what Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy. And the third idea, the third commonality to all the world's great traditions, is that your purpose in life, the reason we're here, the reason you had that conference up there with all the angels and other beings, and you then came down that chute into a human body, have this lifetime now. The purpose, the reason you did that, is to realize that you are that shard of the eternal. The reason you're here is to realize that. That's the only ultimate purpose of your life. It's not to have people like you, to accumulate a lot of likes on Facebook or some other platform, or make a lot of money, or be the life and soul of the party, or have your dreams come true. It's to realize that you are that. Thou art that, as Martin Buber said. You are that. We are that. We all are that. And in fact, when you start to see that in each other, it is so powerful. If you see every person as that shard of the divine, it is powerful. And the reason I am sharing this with you today is because I have spent about 20 years as a researcher studying PTSD. I'm the author of several books, one's called Psychological Trauma. I began working with Vietnam veterans in the early part of the century after the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. My organizations worked with, at this point, we provided free treatment to over 25,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans with PTSD. And we've done many randomized controlled trials. Twice I've testified before US congressional committees on PTSD and veterans. And so we see these people who have had shattering trauma in their lives. And that shattering trauma is very apt to make us forget we're that shard of the divine. It's very difficult to remember you are that when your whole psyche is caught up in survival, in the memory and in the sequel to your traumatic experiences. And we all have those traumatic experiences. So we're born, we grab onto the zip line, go down the chute, land up in a body, start to try and figure it out. Maybe by the time you're a certain age, you've had a few experiences that are both elevated, both transcendent. Research shows that most teenagers have some kind of transcendent experience. Most children have some kind of experience, mystical experience as well. It's often covered over, though, by trauma. And so my work for decades was, how do we remove that trauma? In the workshop I'll be teaching this afternoon from noon to 2 here, I'll be giving you the tools and the techniques. We'll be doing intensive work on the techniques we use to remove that trauma. These are the techniques we're using now with therapists in Iraq, with therapists in all kinds of places in the world where there are traumatized people. In Ukraine right now, there are therapists who we're training to apply these to Ukrainian children, to Ukrainian civilians, to Ukrainian members of the military. And so I'll be sharing with you this afternoon, and then also we'll be actively doing hands-on these techniques to help people clear those traumatic memories. Because when you have those, when you have that terrible accident, when you have that terrible divorce, you have that financial loss, you then often tend to forget you are that shard of the divine. Your mind is preoccupied with those things. In psychology, we have a word for that. It's a simple word, but it's a tragic word, and the word is rumination. Rumination. I'm thinking about the bad stuff. I want to think about the good stuff. I want to think about the blessings of my life, but my mind is pulled toward the bad stuff of my life over and over and over again. So that's just the way our brains work. Once we've had those negative experiences, once we've had that loss, that problem, that tragedy, that tends to preoccupy our focus. And you'll know if you've been through, say, a big financial loss, maybe during the financial crisis, the last one, not the one that's about to happen now, your mortgage was underwater and you couldn't think of anything but your mortgage being underwater. Maybe you got sick, you got very sick one day, or you had a very serious diagnosis, and your mind just returns to it over and over and over again. Like, if you weren't here at Unity in Marin right now, and you were just ruminating, what might you be ruminating on? And probably it would be something bad in your life that just grabs your consciousness. And that was really healthy for our ancestors 1,000,000 years ago to think about the tiger I saw yesterday and obsess about the tiger. It's not so healthy when the tiger you're obsessing about is a paper tiger, only in your mind. You're only worried about something that might happen. Oh, my 401k went down by 10%. It's not going to kill you the way a tiger would have killed your ancestors. So it was useful for our ancestors to really think about those bad things and ruminate. It really helped them in thinking about the tiger all the time. That means when I see the tiger tomorrow, I'll be really alert and I'll run. Not too healthy for you when it's you just obsessing about your body, your illness, your marriage, your divorce, your job, your team, your company, whatever it is you think about. That rumination captures our imagination and distracts us from the fact that we are that shard of the divine. So knowing your brain works that way, knowing your brain has what psychologists call the negativity bias. It's just biased to do that. So it's pulling you toward the negativity all the time, pulling you there all the time. And your job as an adult, now that you aren't a child and a victim anymore, you're an empowered adult, is to do the things that will free you from that rumination, free you from that pull of that tragedy and that trauma. We use a lot of advanced techniques when we work with people, for example, in Iraq, or we work with people in Ukraine. And I'm going to train you in some fairly simple ones this afternoon. I'm going to give you one of those that's valuable, vital, useful now. And I want you to really remember this. So, first of all, know that rumination, the fact that you're a negative thinker. My birthday was yesterday, and someone gave me a birthday card, and it was this woman talking to her husband, and she was just really compassionate about him putting all these notes to try and be a better person all over the house. And she walks into the bathroom, there he is, shaving, and on the mirror there's this big note that says, "Think positive, jackass." You know, we try and think positive and we can't. And so we feel like failures. We're trying to think positive. We find our minds being drawn back to rumination. It's just the way the brain works. In fact, that part of the brain that ruminates is called the default mode network. We default to that when nothing bad's happening, when we're totally chill on a Sunday afternoon, sitting out on a sunny day, or a day that's warmer in the winter. We sit there and we just think about the bad stuff. That's the brain's negativity bias. It's simply a function of the way the brain is built. It's not a moral failure on your part. It's not that you can't think positive. It's just that that's the way your brain is designed to work. It was very adaptive for your ancestors 1,000,000 years ago to think about the tiger and obsess about the tiger when there was no tiger. But now that you don't have tigers to worry about, it's not that healthy anymore, but it's just the way your brain does work. So what can you do? How can you remember you are that shard of the divine? Again, that's the reason you're here, the third of those three pieces of the perennial philosophy. Why you're here is to remember. Remember, remember, remember who you are. How do you remember who you are? Now, there are ways you can support yourself in remembering. One is to show up at a place like this. Here you are, and you're showing up, and you're with other people who are showing up. That's healthy community. That's a powerful way to do that. When my wife or I, maybe some days we're a little bit off, but if I'm off a little bit, she knows who I am, and she'll treat me as who I am, and it'll remind me of who I am, and vice versa. Or my friend, or people around me. So it's useful to have community that helps you do that. The Buddha said that community is one of the 3 essential ways in which we remember is the Sangha, the community. So you have a community here. Reach out to other people. Connect with other people. That's a way of remembering. But there's one way that is recommended by a number of mystics in the Eastern as well as the Western traditions, and that is to simply think of one word that you can remember when you're being pulled into rumination. So you're being pulled into rumination. You find you're trying not to think of the bad stuff. Don't want to think of that bad thing. So it's like, I tell you, don't think of a pink elephant. Do not think of a pink elephant. Do not, whatever you do right now, do not think of a pink elephant. Did that work? Not at all. That's all you can think of is a pink elephant. So what do you do when your mind is being pulled there to that rumination over and over and over again? Now you're not in church. Now you're driving home. Now you're alone this afternoon, and you're thinking about the mean thing somebody said to you. Or it's Thanksgiving, and you're going to see Uncle Harry, who abused you when you were 5 at Thanksgiving. Or you are focused on financial losses you've had, or you're focused on emotional losses, or your body's ailing. And now you don't have this community of wonderful angels around you to remind you. So your thinking is being pulled back into that rumination about these bad things in your life that are real problems. I mean, you don't want to deny them. They actually exist. They're already there. But how do you counteract rumination? So again, in the workshop, I'm going to do some fairly elaborate interventions to help you shift those. But I want to give you one simple one now. And that's the one that Western mystics use, Eastern mystics use. And when you're thinking about the pink elephant, when you're thinking about the bad stuff, when you can't pull your mind loose from the process of rumination, from thinking about, from returning to the bad stuff, this is one thing you can do that is the simplest of simple spiritual practices. And that is to think about one word that is able to remind you that you are that shard of the divine. And that word is a word that you choose. In some spiritual traditions, they'll give you a mantra. They'll say, recite these words. And that can be great. What you can do as well is, if you read the works of some of the Eastern masters, they say, if you don't have a mantra, if no one's giving you a mantra, all you have to do is repeat the word of name of God, the word Om, an inspirational word that's resonant for you. So I want you now, right now, to pick your word. Pick your word that when you feel that suck toward thinking about bad stuff, you're trying to free yourself from negative thinking, that note you have on the mirror there, think positive, jackass, isn't working. What word can you use? What word can you use? Can be the name of a saint, can be Om, can be a value, awe, gratitude, joy, love, peace, anything. It needs to resonate with your whole being. What word resonates with you? Just pause for a moment and reflect on that. What's your word that makes every cell in your body sing in harmony? What word is it when you hear that word you cannot other than smile and laugh and feel joy? And I encourage you to chant that word. Focus on that word. Let that word resonate in your mind daily. I know I chant my word when I'm walking or riding my bike, chant it before I go to sleep. I find myself waking up in the middle of the night just chanting automatically. That was about 5 years of chanting internally before it became automatic. And that's what the mystics say. They say that after a few years of doing it consciously, it just becomes unconscious programming, and you'll find yourself just chanting that. So I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm still chanting, I go back to sleep, I wake up in the morning, I'm still chanting, I walk down to start meditating, I'm chanting, just that word, that name, that phrase, that precious name. Some of the Sufis talk about the 100 names of God. Is there a name of God? Is there a name of a saint that is highly resonant for you? And that's your word. And that's what you do to counteract your brain's negativity bias. Very, very simple way of reprogramming yourself. Just doing that over and over and over again. When you're stuck in negative thinking, when you're just consumed by the tragedies of your life, it's hard to pull yourself out. It's hard to escape the pull of the default mode network. And one of the simplest ways to do that is simply have your word. Have that phrase that you just say over and over and over again. Anandamayi Ma. How many of you know who Anandamayi Ma is or have read any of her work? She was a great saint in Bengal in the early 1900s, and she was once asked, how do you stop your negative thinking, Anandamayi Ma? And she said, when I chant the name of God, there's no room in my mind for anything else. A very simple answer, but a profound one. When you're chanting your word, there's simply no room in your mind for anything else. So maybe that divorce is sucking you in. Maybe that financial loss is preoccupying you. Maybe that disease, maybe that physical illness, maybe that physical pain is trying to suck your attention into it and away from the fact that you are that divine being. And if you simply return to chanting that name, that's able to fill that space. In some of the research I've done, people's physical pain drops significantly. In some studies, up to 2/3. It just goes away. They feel much better. Their physical pain goes away. All kinds of genetic changes happen. In my book, Spiritual Intelligence, I describe some of the changes that happen in the genome. Your genome literally shifts when you are pulling yourself out of that default mode network rumination and back into consciousness. It produces a cascade of biological changes in your body, healthy ones, powerful ones. People who do this live longer than those who don't. So I want to leave you with that simple practice of just chanting the name. And as you chant the name, as it starts to become a practice in your life that you do over and over and over again, and it becomes automatic, it then becomes part of who you are. And many things start to shift in your life when you do that. Your body starts to shift, all those genes start to shift, your outlook starts to shift. Things that were really captivating to you about the tragedies and the problems in your life start to become less captivating. And you start to remember who you are and why you're here. You are consciousness itself in a human body, in a human form. You are that shard of the divine. And you remember it when you chant that word, chant that name, and that's the purpose of your life. That's why you're here. And I can tell you, when you're living that purpose, nothing else is as important as living that purpose. Once you discover the purpose of your life to live as that shard of the divine, once you are living that purpose, everything else is in perspective. Everything else is background to that reality. And you want to be in that space where that is the foreground of your experience. So we're going to go and do a meditation right now. This is called eco-meditation. This is a meditation that I designed for scientific experiments in the late part of 2009, but it will put you in an altered state. We'll spend a few minutes doing that, we'll move into that, and we'll move out again. And then remember your name. Write it down if you need to. If you have a pen here. If you don't have one handy, write it down as soon as you get to your car or someplace you can write things down. And then make that commitment to simply making that repetition your practice. So as we meditate together now, just sit comfortably in your chair. Notice if there are any areas of tension in your body. Let them go. Notice your breath. Close your eyes. And notice the natural rhythm of your breath as it flows in and out. Of your body. And imagine your breath flowing in and out through your heart. And slow your breathing down to 6 seconds per in-breath and 6 seconds per out-breath. Breathing in and out through your heart. And notice the volume of space inside your feet. Notice your feet anchoring you, grounding you to the earth. As you breathe 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out, through your heart. Notice the volume of space between your eyes. And notice the volume of space inside your tongue. Relax your tongue on the floor of your mouth. Let it settle on the floor of your mouth, totally relaxed. Notice again the volume of space between your eyes. As you breathe through your heart, 6 seconds in and 6 seconds out. And silently repeat your word or your name, the name of that being that you represents. the highest possible vibration. Over and over and over again, the precious name, the precious word. Notice how good your body feels as you're chanting. Notice how much calmer your heart is as you chant. Notice your tongue relaxed on the floor of your mouth. Notice the infinite space between your eyes. Notice those 6-second in-breaths and out-breaths through your heart. As you chant the name. And now we'll bring our meditation to a close by taking 3 more breaths. Feeling your feet grounding you to the earth, coming back fully into your body. With the next breath, open your eyes. Notice the light and shade in the room. Notice the color of the walls. Bring yourself fully back to the here and now. It's been a joy to share with you again. Thank you so much. Wonderful to be here again. And just keep on chanting.